Hello and welcome to the Hoop Collective podcast. We talk about the NBA, which we're doing on Thursday afternoon. Joining me from New York City, where he's just back from Boston, where he went to the Warriors-Celtics game on Wednesday night, is Tim Bontemps.
Hello, everybody.
And joining us from Dallas, Texas, Mavericks played the Bulls, I believe, on Wednesday night. There was like 15 games. I had trouble remembering which game you were at. Doncic had like 13 assists, right, MacMahon?
Yes, I would say it was quite forgettable. You see what I did there? Howdy, partners.
Well done. Well done.
Very terrible.
All right, and our special guest.
Hopefully our special guest doesn't leave after that joke. Hopefully.
Yes, joining us from Chicago, Illinois, from the headquarters of Priority Sports, is one of the most respected and longest running agents in the NBA, although represents other athletes as well. And we're very glad to have, before he goes off to the United Center to catch the Minnesota Timberwolves playing the Chicago Bulls tonight. He was so inspired by the Bulls play last night in Dallas. He just had to go out to see the Bulls tonight. Mark Bartelstein. Hello, Mark. How are you?
I'm doing great, guys. Good to be with you.
We were just admiring behind you the photo behind on the wall of John Hot Rod Williams. And as you know, Mark, because we've known each other for a long time, I grew up, going to Cavs games in Richfield at the Richfield Coliseum, and John was one of your first clients, right? Who was your first client, and what year did you start as an agent?
Well, my first client in the NBA was Greg Stokes, part of the Twin Towers at Iowa. Greg Stokes and Michael Payne. So Greg was the first.
I have no memory of him. I'm sorry.
Really? Look it up. They were the Twin Towers at Iowa. Iowa was the heyday of Iowa basketball. George Raveling was coaching, and they were really good. Greg played with the Sixers. Was drafted by the Sixers. Michael, I think, was drafted by Houston. Played a little bit the Rockets. Then he went and played overseas. But and then Hot Rod came, kind of right after that. But yeah, those were amazing days. I remember going to the Coliseum.
Oh yeah, Hot Rod Williams, and then famously got one of the biggest offer sheets in NBA history with the Miami Heat. 7 years, $28 million. I can still remember it, Mark. I can still remember it as a young Cavs fan. Oh my God, Hot Rod Williams. We might lose him to the Miami. And Hot Rod famously, the late Hot Rod Williams, famously in Cleveland said, "As far as I'm concerned, I'm a Heat," which was, what was that? 1989, 1990.
That was 1990. Yeah. So yeah, those are amazing days. That was, Hot Rod, more than anybody, is what's helped, build our company for sure. Hot Rod, and his story was incredible. Everything that went on at Tulane, just what people tried to do to him down there, and just an amazing guy. It was amazing for me. We wound up representing a lot of players on the Cavaliers because of Hot Rod. Wound up representing Larry. That's how I met Steve Kerr. Still represents Steve to this day. Steve was Hot Rod. Bobby Phills, who tragically passed away in a car accident. Gerald Wilkins. All those guys honestly became clients of ours. Because of Hot Rod.
Well, the best I can say about Mark is what I would say if he wasn't even here. And what I'd say about Mark is that even though he has represented major stars throughout his career, he represents a number of players right now who he's negotiated max contracts for. I go down the list, but Bradley Beal, Michael Porter Jr. Are some of them that you've got now. But the thing that Mark does, and I would say this to anybody, and I have said it, is that he treats all of his clients the same. He will fight for a player, and I'm not comparing to other agents. I'm just telling you my perspective of dealing with Mark for over 20 years. He will fight for a guy getting a max or minimum contract as much as he will fight for Bradley Beal to get a no trade clause. Some are probably easier than others, Mark, but he will represent Sam Merrill of the Cavs with as much ferocity as he will represent Brad Beal. I've seen it happen over and over and over, and I don't know if that's what you've always tried to do, Mark, but that's what I've always seen in how you operate.
I appreciate that very much. Those are really kind words. To me, there's no alternative. Like, these guys, they're the best in the world at what they do. And there's 450, standard contracts in the NBA, another 92 ways. And there's millions and millions that think they should be in the NBA. And they're putting their life in my hands. At the end of the day, that's what they're doing. They're choosing us, and all of their dreams, all of their goals, all their aspirations, they're counting on us to make it happen. And so, yeah, I mean, every decision you make is critical for their future and for their family. And so we take it very seriously. And there is no difference. Literally, whether you're doing a two-way contract, you're doing a max contract, there is no difference in the level of sort of just emotion and passion that goes into it. It can't be. It's too important.
I also learned today, because and this is again in my world, Ryan Kalkbrenner from Creighton basketball in Omaha. I learned today that you guys represent him because he had a cool 49 points on Wednesday night. So he might be taking care of that guy on some contracts soon, Mark.
Happy for him. It's interesting. He had a really tough decision to make last year, to stay in the draft or not. And we talked about it at length, and he wanted to go back and have just an incredible summer and take his game to a different level. And so he made the decision, which I thought was so mature, because nowadays it's almost like a rite of passage to go test the waters. Everybody tests the waters. Everybody goes through the draft process. And we made the decision, like, if our heart isn't going back to school, then why don't we forget about testing the waters and spend, April, May, June, July, August, get 6 great months in the weight room, on the court with Coach McDermott, with the entire staff at Creighton. And he literally dedicated every day during that period. And I could feel it about a month ago, just talking to Coach Mack and everyone there at Creighton. He had taken a huge jump. Now, I wasn't expecting, to almost get 50 in opening night, but it's a testament to the work Ryan's put in. He's a different guy right now. And he's 3-time, defensive player of the year in the Big East as it is. So for him to do what he did and get off to a start like that, we're really happy for him.
I mean, Mark, you've obviously worked with college players for a long time because you're going through the process of recruiting these guys. But now, obviously, it's a much different relationship when you're representing a guy like Ryan. When he's in school, you're with him on a daily basis like that. How much has that changed the process you guys have to now be dealing with these players for a longer period, recruiting them earlier, going through the NIL space? I imagine it's been an interesting learning curve to kind of figure out where the whole landscape is now over the past few years.
Yeah, no question. I mean, the first year of NIL, we kind of sat it out a little bit because I wanted to see exactly where it was going to go and get a feel for it and not just dive in blindly. I wanted to, educate ourselves and learn. But no doubt, it's the same thing. It's a really intense relationship. I mean, obviously we're handling their NIL and their off-court opportunities, but in doing that, you also have to help them manage their day-to-day, world, so they can because those NIL opportunities are only coming if they're taking care of business on the court with themselves individually and obviously with their team, especially on a team basis. In college basketball, you get noticed for winning, and so it's really honestly not much different in terms of the energy you're putting in with our NIL clients as you are with your NBA clients.
Yeah. So, but you took Baylor Shireman. Baylor Shireman left Creighton, went and became a first-round pick, but then you kept Kalkbrenner. But you also represent Greg McDermott's son, Doug.
Yes.
So you got signed to the Sacramento Kings. There's all these intersections that happens in your world. You're
no doubt.
It's hard to keep everybody happy. I'll tell you that.
I was laughing on my flight here from Boston because Baylor was on my flight on his way to meet up with Maine, which hadn't been announced by the Celtics yet. I was waiting for the Celtics to say, we've assigned Baylor to the Maine Celtics, because I knew where he was headed, because he was going to be at the game tomorrow.
He could have broken that story.
Get up and down the floor. And so this would be great for him. This would be a great experience for him for sure.
This is what I'm talking about. Like, he is so but he's like, he will tell you everything that you need to know about Baylor Shireman and Kalkbrenner, and he will tell you everything you need to know about, Corey Kispert, who just signed an extension. He just negotiated an extension with Corey Kispert for the Wizards. And how I just was talking to people at the Suns about Bradley playing better defense, being more engaged on the defensive end. And I'll bet you've been involved in that too, Mark, because that's what it is. You spend all day dealing with all these
funny
clients.
You say that because he didn't get a lot of shot attempts last night. So when we spoke after the game last night about midnight, I said, well, here's the good news. I said, I'm now putting you out there for all defensive team. That's where we're going. And I got news for you. If you watch their games, the way he's playing, defensively, he has been unbelievable. Literally, Bud is giving him he's given the task, guarding the best offensive player every night, and no one's getting by him. I'll tell you that much.
Well, he did a really nice job down the stretch the other night in the game in Phoenix against Philly too. I mean, they obviously Kevin hit a bunch of shots, but Brad was really into guys down the stretch, helped turn that game around and get him a win and late at the buzzer.
Yeah, I mean, we were going to talk about CBA stuff, which we'll get there, but I'll just say, because I'm preparing I'm on Countdown on Friday, and we got a Suns Mavericks game. Talked to some folks in the Suns organization, and it's one of the things they talk about. They said, this year, Brad, like he is used to having a big role on a team. Obviously, when he was with the Wizards, he was the primary scorer. And he's like, how do I have just a big of a role here when you've got Kevin Durant and you've got Devin Booker there? And what he and Mike Budenholzer have come to understand and all that is I can have a big role by guarding the best wing on the other end. And maybe I won't be a Hall of Fame defender, but I can be still a Hall of Fame player with what I can do at both ends. And like what Brad is doing, he's changing. His game is changing this year. And, that's not something that a guy who's been a multi-time All-Star, that's not something you just assume is going to happen.
Well, and that was the biggest question about the Suns, right? When they get Tyus Jones, like, okay, they've got a legitimate point guard. Now they've got their 3 max guys that are going to be in the starting lineup. The question is, okay, who's guarding the other team's best player? And, looks like Brad has stepped up and given them an answer.
Yeah, no, he'll have his games where he'll have 35 or 40, as will KD, as will Book, and and they'll rotate that. But Brad is definitely taking on the role as being the defensive stopper. He's been an unbelievable playmaker for him. So he's been dealing with a little bit of an elbow issue too. He tweaked his elbow, I think the second game of the year, and that so that messed him up a little bit. But now that's feeling much better. But no, he's playing great. They're playing really well. So they made some really nice additions in the offseason, and they're gonna be right there. There's no question.
Yeah, I feel like the Suns are an interesting topic here because when teams clear out cap space or make major trades like the Suns did, they pretty much cleared out their roster to bring in Durant and Bradley. You were instrumental because of Brad's no trade clause that you helped negotiate with the Wizards. You had to be a big part. I mean, it was essentially a free agent move because the Suns had to work through you and you had to work through the Wizards. That was a unique. How many no trade clauses are out there? LeBron just got one. Is there only 2? Mark, do you know off top?
Yeah, no, that's it.
Yeah.
Those 2. Yeah.
And it's funny because I was at the Clippers 76ers game on Wednesday night, and Paul George got booed by the fans and with the Clippers, and he's kind of frustrated because he's like, look, the 76ers offered me $50 million, actually I think $60 million more, and one of the sticking points was that he was maybe willing to take a 3-year contract, but if he took a 3-year contract, he wanted a no trade clause. They're hard to get, But when you do that, when a team like the Suns do that, and you hollow out your depth, we've seen this. I'll just say I was talking to James Jones about this, the general manager of the Suns. What happened with the Suns reminds me so much of what happened with the Heat back in 2010. The Heat went all the way down to 2 players on their roster. I think they had Mario Chalmers and Dexter Pittman, who was like their 2nd round pick. That was the only thing they had. I think actually Mario was the only guy who was actually on their books.
Yeah.
And then they signed some guys, and then they got like 7 or 8 minimum guys. And like, there were some guys who were okay, but they're running through Eric Dampier and my guy, but Zydrunas Ilgauskas was at the last year of his career, and Jerry Stackhouse was there for like 3 weeks, and Carlos Arroyo. Yeah. And the point is, it took them until they got Shane Battier through free agency and Norris Cole through the draft and Chris Birdman Anderson and later Ray Allen till they built out that team. And if you look at where the Suns are now as to where they were a year ago, they've got Royce O'Neal, who I believe is also one of your clients who you negotiated a new deal with.
He's been amazing for them. He's played great. Yeah.
Exactly. They didn't have him a year ago. And they got Ryan Dunn. They drafted him out of Virginia, and he's been a revelation for them. And they got Tyus Jones, and they got Mason Plumlee, who I also believe you represent. They had to build out their team. And so that is a process that takes a while. So, yeah, Brad and Durant and Booker are definitely working off each other more. They're finding their roles a little bit more, but you got to build out your team. It doesn't just happen overnight. And I think it's a lesson kind of for the Knicks fans and the 76ers fans who are out there who are having to go through that process right now.
And you got to build chemistry too, not just build your team, but you have to build chemistry. You have to have reps together. I think you have to go through adversity together. You got to show resiliency together. Like all those things matter, and it doesn't just happen overnight. And so I think, what the Suns went through last year, I think the loss to Minnesota in the playoffs, I think those guys came back and there's a connectivity that wasn't there when they first started last year. So listen, it's so competitive. People don't, I think the fans, sometimes the media doesn't quite understand how hard it is to win in the NBA. Like it is really hard to win. All these teams are great. All these teams have great players. And you can be a really good team and still lose. You can be a really good team and lose in a playoff series. And sometimes, and obviously I know it's the job of the media all the time to dissect everything and why it happened. But I mean, I laugh sometimes. I watch all the games. You listen to the dialogue after a game, and somebody got beat at the buzzer, and there's 1,000 reasons why they lost. There's 1,000 reasons why the other team won. You would think they won by 100. They won by a shot at the buzzer. So it's really hard to win, but I think, like you said, they've had to build this thing, and I think they're in a much better place, obviously, now than they were a year ago. Their record shows it for the moment, but it's a day-by-day thing. All this stuff is very fragile in the NBA. It's so nuanced, and it can slip away in about 2 seconds, and you can recover, just as quick.
We've talked a lot about the Suns, and we haven't talked about the CEO of the Suns, who happens to also be your son. And I was curious, what has it been like dealing with him in that manner, and at times, I'm sure, negotiating with him and watching him grow into the job in Phoenix?
Yeah, it's a little bizarre, to tell you the truth. There's no question about that. I mean, he was just sitting in the back seat of my car driving to AAU games, and sleeping, eating a turkey Subway, and listening to my conversations, So yeah, I mean, I'm really proud of him. He's done an amazing job there, along with James and Matt, and they've built a heck of a front office, and so but like I've told him, like it is the same thing. It's so fragile, it's just, and there's only one winner at the end of the year. And when you have 3 players, you got 3 Hall of Famers like Brad and Kevin, and Booker, the expectations, boy, they're high. They're high. And Matt Ishbia is super competitive guy, which is great for the Phoenix fan base, and great for that organization, that city. But he's competitive and he wants to win, and he's going to be demanding, which is great. I think it's great for Josh because he's going to have to be on it every single day. But no, it's been fun to watch, and there's no doubt it's a little bit, tough, not tough, but it's interesting at times when you have to have conversations about players and decisions you have to make and things of that nature. Sometimes I'll just try go right to James or Matt, so I have to deal with Josh. And
I don't.
Stay away from her,
I don't blame him for that. So the Suns put out this video where they had footage of their war room on draft night.
Yeah.
And basically showed Josh and James negotiating trades. It was actually fascinating. I'm thrilled that they put it out. It was all positive. I mean, it showed the deal. They moved back 6 spots and ended up getting Ryan Dunn, who's been great. Did you see? I'm sure you saw it, but did you critique Josh's negotiations on those? Because we saw like them kind of going back and forth with the Nuggets and with the Knicks.
Yeah, I did. I actually did critique it a little bit, to tell you the truth. But some of it, was like the timing. Like some of it didn't make sense because the timing of it. I mean,
there was some editing. There was some editing.
Those phone calls were out of sequence. Right. Kind of the way it really works in real time. But I thought it was really interesting. But that's a perfect example of kind of, I think, why Matt is such an amazing owner to work for, because man, he is proactive and innovative and wants to be first on everything, and he's a risk taker, and so I think that's a fun organization to work for right now, because they're not going to sit back and just wait. They're going to go get it, and that's Matt's mentality.
Talking about being a risk taker, obviously that is an expensive roster, and with the new CBA, it's like they blew by the aprons, and like they are one of the handful of all-in teams. From your perspective, now that we've had a little bit of of time with this CBA, with the apron rules and all that stuff. What's your take on it from an agent? What are the challenges that it represents for you? And, what maybe are some of your critiques of the CBA?
Well, I mean, my initial take from where I sit, right, I hate it because it's restrictive and takes away, what in the world I live in. I want flexibility for my clients. I want player movement. I want to be able to engage with all 30 teams, right? We weren't able to do that under the old CBA because of you could engage with all 30 teams, but they were restricted in what they could do. Now they're far more restricted. Some teams you can't even engage with, for the, other than maybe a minimum deal, so even the Knicks couldn't even do that, to begin the season. So from that standpoint, I'm not a big fan. I understand the logic behind it. I understand what Adam's trying to accomplish, and he wants parity. He wants to create as much equal competition to win a championship as possible. I personally disagree a little bit with him on what is best for the league, because I think where you create the most interest in the NBA is not during the season, it's in the off season. That's where you create the most interest. That's where fans buy season tickets. That's where sponsors jump in because they see, wow, this team made this move, that team made that move. They're improved, and people jump on board and they get excited. If you're taking a bunch of teams that whose ownership wants to be competitive and wants to spend money and wants to do everything to give their fans a chance to win, and you're not allowing them to do that, you're making it so restrictive and the penalties are so punitive. I don't think that's great for the game. Now Adam's counter to that is he thinks it's, if I can create 30 teams with an equal chance to win a championship, we're going to have a much more compelling season, many more fan bases be engaged throughout the year. And so we'll see. We're just getting started in it, and time will tell. But from the standpoint of wanting, as a player, you want, business is about leverage. Leverage comes from choices. And if your choices are diminished, then as a player, you have less leverage. And that's part of the problem right now with the new CBA.
Yeah, it's almost, I've had agents saying dire things like free agency is dead. It might be a little bit extreme, but certainly players are highly incentivized to do extensions. And the thing about extensions is if you're not a free agent, you're negotiating against, value and theory as opposed to other offers. And so we see a lot of extensions happening out there. I'm not sure where you are. In some ways, it means you need an agent more. So it might be, I guess, better for business. But on the other hand, I can see why agents have been frustrated by it.
Well, yeah, I think there's always, again, this is self-serving to say it, but I think there's the right representation's invaluable. The right representation can make all the difference in a player's career. And I think that's more so now than ever with the CBA is so complicated, and you have to be able to project out where teams are going to be, what your optionality is going to be going forward. You have to understand everyone's cap sheets. All these things play a really heavy role into it. And extensions have become much more viable, but there's two reasons for that. One is there are some fear of going into the free agency market because of the things I said before. The other reason is they've expanded the extension rules. So they've made the ability to do extensions much more lucrative than they were before. They've opened up the doors there on what you can do in terms of years and, salary increases. So both those things. I was saying this to, actually to Michael Winger when we were doing Corey Kispert's contract, and all the dire forecast of where we're going in free agency. Every single time, literally in my entire career, I can't tell you how many times. I remember Bob Whitsitt yelling at me when he was at Portland about how this is the end of free agency. And, whenever
Right.
you have a new CBA, and in that first year or two, there's a small incremental increase in the cap, everything gets condensed and you don't have player movement. We had a very small cap increase last year. Part of that because of the regional TV deals, the teams got hurt by that. We're going to have a 10% increase this year, 10% increase for the coming years off the national TV deal. You'll see free agency will blow right back up. The mid-level exception is going to be in 4 or 5 years from now, could be over $20 million a year. So there's free agency will be alive and kicking, and I think you'll see it this summer in a big way. But everybody loves to create a dire forecast when you go through a summer like we just did, but there's reasons for that this summer. First year of people getting adjusted to the new system, very small cap increase, those things all happening at the same time.
Well, Brian's mentioned a couple of times that you represent guys across the spectrum, and you mentioned earlier that there's 450 roster spots and there's 90 two-way spots. And I think you would agree that not all of those 450 roster spots are being used in part because of those 90 two-way spots. And I was just curious, with the invention of the two-way, the addition of the third one, the way teams have used that as a tool in the second round in particular over the last couple of years, I'm curious what your overall thoughts are on that, and if there are things you would like to see changed about that rule. Because I assume one in particular you'd like to change in terms of the tender on the restricted nature of it. But I'm curious what else you would like to change.
I think overall, I think the best 450 players should be in the NBA. That should be unquestionably the way it should be. And I don't know that we have that, because there's some roster spots that are being taken up, maybe because a team wants to hold a player because his contract has a contract value that can be used in a trade going forward at the trade deadline. There's teams that don't have 15 that have 14 because of the 3 two-ways. There's some really good players, that ended the year in the league last year, really good players that don't have jobs right now, that are for sure aren't just NBA. I mean, they're rotational NBA players, and so that that's frustrating to me, because again, man, it's so hard to become one of those guys, to get to that level, and when you deserve to still be in the league, you don't have a job. That's very difficult, and so I think there's some things that can be done where we could tweak some things where certain contracts would potentially not count against the cap, wouldn't count against, going against the aprons. There's things we could do at the margins that at least let's do everything we can to make sure we get the very best players in the league. And I don't know that that's always the case right now, because there are players there are teams that aren't that, are not committed to winning at the highest level this year. Right. And they're doing things to set themselves up at the trade deadline, or even the next year at the draft, that that they're sacrificing having better players on their roster, and that's very harmful to NBA players.
Not committed to winning at the highest level that sounds even better than focused on player development.
Well, I was going to ask you, as Brian alluded to earlier, and on the pod, we talk a lot about the Cavs. We have a popular Cavs Corner segment that we're trying to get sponsored. And a prime member of that typically is Max Strus. So obviously right now is dealing with an injury, but Max is a guy who, was in Boston, went to Chicago on two-ways, had an injury, came back, got to Miami, really turned himself into a really good player, got himself a big contract with the Cavs. And a lot of that story is obviously Max developing from one player at DePaul to the one that he is now. And obviously we talk a lot about teams and developing players and, the process teams go through to get guys minutes on the court, et cetera. I was curious from your perspective, we talked about Ryan and Creighton earlier and the work he's doing in the summer. What is sort of your guys' approach as a agency to try to help your players improve and take the steps forward that they need to get to the next level as players? Like, how much are you guys involved in that, and sort of what are the processes you guys go through to try to help these guys be able to make the steps like you were just talking about to be in position to, advance in their career, get more minutes and more production, and then ultimately more money?
Yeah, no, we're heavily involved. I mean, it's a daily process. I mean, I think a lot of people think that we sit around here and negotiate contracts all day. That's the smallest part of what we do. We're trying to help guys build careers, and it is a daily process. And so whether it's, obviously every player and the team he's with, those teams have player development staffs, and they're watching film and they're doing that, but we're absolutely layering on top of it. Now we try and do it alongside in collaboration with the team. We're not going to say do A when the team's saying do B. That's not going to work out well, So you want to understand the vision the team has for the player, what the head coach's vision is, what are the parameters they want him playing under. But within all that, we're trying to build. And, we have our own player development staff here. Kyle McElharney and Torian Jones are unbelievable with the guys. They work with the guys all summer. They can make trips during the season. We do film breakdown, we do analytical breakdown again, but we're always trying to make sure we're aligned with the teams, because we don't want to, have Doc Rivers telling Bobby Portis one thing and I'm telling Bobby something else. That's not going to work out well. But yeah, we think that's a huge part of the value add that we need to bring on a daily basis. And it's something we take very, very seriously.
You have Zach Edey in Memphis, and he probably the most fascinating player in that rookie class for a lot of reasons. He's massive, the production at Purdue. And then there's so many questions about, okay, how does this 7'4" back to the basket player fit in this NBA today that's all about pace and space and 3-point shooting and all those sort of things? What have you thought about Zach's fit so far in Memphis and the way that he's adjusting to the NBA?
Yeah, I'm so proud of him. I can't even tell you. I'm so proud of him. You talk about a guy whose care factor is off the charts, competitiveness off the charts. He's been questioned, doubted his whole career. Nobody recruited him come out of high school. Matt Painter thought he saw a little something, and Matt and his staff at Purdue, my God, what an unbelievable job they did with him. Zach also had those decisions to make through his college career, whether to come out and go back. He was going to be probably a mid-second round pick. We had some teams that were going to promise us to be a second round pick. He wanted to go back to Purdue, and it wasn't just because of the draft, because he had such a bad taste in his mouth of that first round loss. And I don't know if has there ever been a college player of the year who exponentially improved like he did to be the back-to-back college player of the year, and yet even with all that, man, there were so many people questioning me and him on whether he could play in the end. There were teams that didn't want to touch him. Like there were so many teams that said, Mark, no, that's not going to work.
I talked to some of them. I said, what about Zach Edey? They're like, we'd have no interest in him.
It's just like, great college player. I just don't think it's going to work. Doesn't fit our system. I'm like, doesn't fit your system. Well, then you better change your system, because this guy's a dominant. We're playing basketball. It's not like we're saying, okay, Zach was a great rugby player at Purdue, and now we're going to try to play basketball. It was basketball at Purdue, So
they were playing basketball.
It is new for him. He's used to being the center of attention. He's used to every time coming down, getting a post up, and now he's got to play in space more, and he's got to come set, numerous ball screens, often numerous in a particular possession for Ja. But he's figured it out, and you see it, and you can see his brain. I just know him, so I can see his thought process. It's not natural yet for him, but he had a massive game the other night against Brooklyn.
I was at that game. I was going to say he was awesome. 25 and 12, 4 blocks. He hit a 3. Yeah. It was very impressive.
It's going to get better and better, because, and the reason I can tell you it's going to get better and better is not just the talent and the size. It's what I said before, the care factor. Like he wants it so bad, cares so much, so competitive. It's going to just get better and better here.
Well, that's another guy, like you mentioned how teams in the past had looked at him possibly to promise him in the second round. And one of the questions was he going to be quick enough to play in a league at that size, right? And like you watch him, you look at him now, and we talked about him last couple of weeks on the podcast, like he's dropped a ton of weight. He looks a lot quicker. Yeah, like he's moving around really well on the court. What kind of conversations did you guys have over the past year or so about like that part of things in terms of, hey, obviously you're having an unbelievable college career, but if you are going to be a guy that's going to stay on the court in sort of the new era that the NBA is in, these are the things you have to do body-wise to be in a position to maximize what you can do.
Yeah. So I mean, we talked about all during the year at Purdue, but during the season, I wanted him to focus. He was trying to win national championship. I wanted the focus to be on Purdue and doing those things. Matt Painter and I talked at different times about little things they could tweak, little things they could add to his game that would translate to the NBA, things that we could show NBA people that Zach was improving those areas while not taking away from Purdue goals. So Matt was such a great partner with that. Then when the season was over, he came into Chicago as part of our pre-draft program. And that's where Kyle and Torian did an incredible job. I mean, they did so much work with him every single day, mimicking NBA actions and getting him out on the perimeter and, setting ball screens and shooting threes and, slipping screens, popping, doing all those things, guarding on the perimeter. At our pro day, I don't know if you guys were there. I mean, I think what blew people away at our pro day was the way he guarded on the perimeter. He stepped out and guarded people. And we had a lot of really good players at our pro day. So yeah, that goes back to what we talked about before, the player development. Like if we don't do a great job every day of helping our guys grow and evolve and understand the challenges ahead of them that they need to conquer, you're not going to get to the point of negotiating the contracts you want to negotiate.
Yeah, and that's got to be rewarding for you to see a guy. I mean, obviously the guy is internationally famous, but to see a guy, that night, that draft night, where you're not sure where he's going to go and he ends up going in the top 10. I'm sure you have stories on the other way where you thought a guy in the top 10 goes way back, but that, has to be.
No doubt. It was a great, I mean, I was just so happy for him. He just deserved it, like he earned it every which way. And, so yeah, that was when I got the call, from Zach Kleiman saying we're taking him at 9. That was no question a really good feeling.
You have a client that has had a fascinating career and a fascinating last couple years, TJ McConnell, who I'm not sure what his, where his role was. When he started in Philadelphia, then he's been in Indiana, and he's 32 years old, I think, and you just got him. I think a 3-year extension, a 4-year extension.
3-year extension, 4 years total.
Yeah. This is a guy who's 6'1", absolutely nothing about him screams elite NBA player. And yet he's become extremely valuable to that team, to the point where, like, I know 4 or 5 teams that were dying to pull him out of Indiana and were like begging to trade for him like 2 years ago, and they would never let him go. And this to me is a quintessential Bartelstein player. Like, I know obviously you got the top end guys, you had Gordon Hayward, for example, who just retired. He signed many huge contracts, but like these Max Struses and TJ McConnells, these are Bartelstein players. And this is a quintessential Bartelstein player, TJ McConnell.
Yeah. I mean, he's so unique. Like he's got a spirit about him and a energy and a toughness that is almost unmatchable, to be honest with you. I mean, like if you're going to war, you want TJ McConnell on your side. And the craziest thing with TJ is, like, you spend time with him off the floor. He's the sweetest, nicest, like the guy's, he's up every day, the sun's shining, everything's wonderful. But man, talk about flipping a switch. He gets on that court. He is something. And he's self-made. Like, you talk about a guy, nothing's been handed to him. But when he switched to us, was referred to us by our client of ours, whatever, I think it's 6-7 years ago, he had never even had a guaranteed dollar in a contract at that point. Right.
He had one of those Sam Hinkie deals, right? It was like 4 years non-guaranteed. Yeah.
It's 12 years non-guaranteed. You might get meal money. That's
right.
But he just works. And, every year it was like, you try to put him in a box and say, okay, well, he'll be this, and he just outplays it every single year. And he's just a winner, man. He's a winner, and he's the best teammate you could ever want to have. He uplifts everyone around him. He brings an energy level. It's actually a 4-year extension we did for him. And honestly, like, the Pacers didn't have to do that. Like, he had another year left on his contract. He's in his 30s. They didn't have to do that, but just hats off to that organization, to Kevin and Chad and Rick, because they acknowledged how impactful TJ is, on the floor, in the locker room, in that community. And they did the right thing, and we're very appreciative for what they did. But TJ's earned it every which way, for sure.
I'm going to go out on a limb and guess that Joe Ingles has probably been the most high maintenance client that you've ever. What is it about Joe that makes him the biggest pain in the butt you've ever had to deal with?
He just was born as a pain in the ass. Like he was born that way. You know what I mean? So I'm going to see him here tonight, and as soon as I see him, he'll have some sarcastic ass comment to make to me, and that's just the way he likes it. You know what I mean? I'm going to give it right back.
All right. Well, Mark, you've got to get to work at the United Center.
All right. Well,
we always
appreciate being out here. This has been great.
Yeah, I always appreciate you working with us, and sometimes not working with us. You got to handle your business, and I always appreciate that. Sometimes when we go to, when we get at cross purposes, at the end of the day, we're okay, because
always.
Sometimes you got to fight for your guys. Sometimes you got to do your job, and I always appreciate it. So thank you.
I will say also, I've always appreciated, Mark, that you've treated everybody in the media the same also, and you've always,
and he calls you back. Mark Bartelstein calls you back.
Mark, and we've said this to people privately too. Like, you call everybody back, you treat everybody the same, you deal with everybody the same. So thank you for that also. It's always been appreciated.
Very nice of you guys. I appreciate it. You guys have all treated me great. So, what goes around comes around. So we appreciate it very, very much.
And definitely disparage MacMahon to Ingles, because I'm sure you will agree.
If you just say, hey, I'm
going to get, the funny thing about Joe is, like, he's always ornery. But he is the most loyal dude in the world. And he is such a good guy, and that was he's going to be a great pickup for the Timberwolves. Joe can.
He's like MacMahon. He's a good guy who tries to pretend he's not. It's his
thing. Funniest.
That's why they get along.
I love him, man. He's something. He's a lot of fun. So I'll tell him I'll give him a big kiss for you guys.
Please do, Mark.
Mark, take care. All right, thank you very much to Mark Bartelstein of Priority Sports. We've had some agents on over the years. Rich Paul, Mark Termini. Mark Termini is currently suing Rich Paul, which is interesting.
Let's have them on together.
I hope I'm not dragged into the discovery process. But
hopefully, it doesn't mean Mark Bartelstein is going to sue us now, because we'll lose.
I would lose. I would definitely lose.
There's not a whole lot of money to get, at least not in the non-Omaha division.
Yeah, right.
Certainly true.
Yeah. All right. So we did have some interesting stuff happen in the NBA this week. Very active day on Wednesday. The Warriors, with as impressive of a win as there's been so far this year, Bontemps going into Boston. Obviously, Jaylen Brown didn't play, nor Porzingis, but the Warriors winning that game sort of makes their start verified. I mean, It's still early. Their schedule was a little favorable.
More than a little. I mean, look, they came into they played Boston Wednesday night. Obviously, they won. They're in Cleveland, Cavs corner, upcoming, playing the undefeated Cavs, and then they're in Oklahoma City.
Game of the year Friday night in Cleveland.
I don't know if it's quite past the game from yesterday, but maybe. Then they play in Oklahoma City Sunday. Tuesday, opening night of the NBA Cup, the debut of Joel Embiid playing against the Knicks, followed by Klay Thompson returning to the Bay to play the Warriors. Neither one of those things coincidental. And then the Warriors then play the Memphis Grizzlies after that, with Ja Morant and Zach Edey, we just talked about. Obviously, that stretch of 5 games, we're going to learn a lot about this team. And you watch that game Wednesday night, game I was at. Boston was as discombobulated offensively as they've been basically the entire time Joe Mazzulla's been the coach. They were completely up into them from a pressure and scheme standpoint. Defensively, gave the Celtics a ton of trouble, played really hard. Steph looked great coming off the ankle injury, made a bunch of plays down the stretch. And, we go back to 2015, and we all covered the Warriors that first year when Steve Kerr won. They had the whole strength and numbers thing. They were playing 10, 11 guys. They got Sean Livingston. They had Murray Spates. They had, Festus Ezeli and Andrew Bogut, all these guys that could all do a little bit of different stuff. And this team is not that caliber of team. They don't have that kind of ceiling, but they're playing 11, 12, 13 guys a night. They played 11 guys last night. Brandon Pajemski didn't play because he was sick. And all 11 guys played, I think, at least 13 minutes. They all had significant contributions in the game. And you could just feel how much fun they're having as a group playing this way. Steph said multiple times after the game, he really likes the way they're playing because every night looks different and feels different because there's different combinations of guys out there. And you could just see how excited Steve Kerr in particular is about playing this way, because this is sort of what he wants to do. Like, comes out of the Greg Popovich, Phil Jackson school of like every guy has a part to play. Every guy has stuff to do. He gets guys in the game in different matchups. Last night, Kevon Looney was a monster in the fourth quarter, grabbing a bunch of offensive rebounds, reminiscent of the finals against Boston a couple of years ago at TD Garden when he offensive rebounded them through that series. Andrew Wiggins played great defense on Jason Tatum last night. Like, it was a comprehensive performance. And if Steph Curry could stay healthy, I think this Golden State team, I thought in the summertime they could be a top 4 team in the West. If Steph stays healthy, I think they will be a top 4 team in the West because they've got the depth to withstand a couple injuries outside of Steph, and their defense is really, really legit.
You haven't even mentioned their most impactful player so far this season, a guy who's having an absolute blast. Buddy Hield has been unbelievable. Plus 20 in last night's game. This guy's averaging 21 points in like 25 minutes off the bench, shooting 52% from the floor, 51 from three-point range. And look, he's not going to keep up that percentage, I don't think. Nobody ever has. But the guy's a shooter who is thriving in that system. And, I don't want to get into the Buddy Hield, Klay Thompson comparison.
I'm going to. So go ahead.
Well, that's fine. Klay's helping the Mavericks, and he's happy with the Mavericks. Buddy Hield has slid right into that role and it's a little different role because he is coming off the bench on a full-time basis. But as far as just like a high volume gunner, and 2 weeks in the season, whatever it is, 2 to 3 weeks, whatever, but you'd have to consider Buddy Hield for the All-Star team right now. That's how
certainly
good he's been.
6th man of the year leading.
Oh, no, that's not even a conversation.
So I think, okay, so here, obviously, if you talk Klay Thompson, 2013 to 2022.
Well, you don't even have to say that. We're not talking about that.
Okay, fine. But it can be used, it can be pulled out and used against me. So let me just say, I'm not comparing him, Klay Thompson, to that. But let me just say this. Klay Thompson, when it comes to the three-point shot, which is what the Warriors are looking for in this position at this point, okay? Because Klay Thompson's not a plus defender anymore. He was a plus defender for a decade. He's just not anymore, okay?
I will say he has been solid for the Mavericks, but he's not going to make the all-defensive team as he did back in the day.
Fair. Klay Thompson, his career coming into this season, he averaged 7.6 three-pointers per game. And I understand you shoot more three-pointers now than you did 6 years ago. I get it. And he shot 41% on threes, okay? Buddy Hield coming into the season, 7.6 three-pointers per game, 40% in his career. If you're moneyballing this, like if you go back to the old Moneyball thing where, Billy Bean had to replace Jason Giambi, right? Mm-hmm. How do you replace Klay Thompson? You got to do it with free agents that are available. The Warriors are like, where can we get a guy who can shoot high volume threes at a reasonable percentage? They find Buddy Hield, okay? Last year, Klay Thompson made $43 million, okay? He shot 38% on about 9 threes a game. Obviously, Klay was not going to make $43 million this year, but he ended up making, I think, 16 or so million.
He got a 3-year, $50 million deal from the Mavericks. Okay. The extension he declined from the Warriors before last season was 2 years, 47. And then they never really got back to the negotiating table because he decided he was moving on. They were trying to do other things.
Buddy Hield is making $8 million this year. Okay. He shot 38% on threes last year, comparable to Klay. Now, he lost his playing time when he went to Philly. Nick Nurse benched him in the playoff series.
Well, the Warriors play much like the Kings did and much like the Pacers did with Tyrese Halliburton and Buddy Hield, where they're playing fast and random and Buddy's moving around and they're running plays for him. The Sixers didn't. They're built around Joel Embiid. They're not built to really take advantage of Buddy's skill set, and it wasn't a good fit.
And there wasn't a massive demand for Buddy Hield in the free agent market because maybe of that, and the Warriors identified it.
Buddy Hield also turned down an extension with the Pacers for more money, and Obviously now ended up like Klay Thompson wound up making less, but it's fine.
And by the way,
the right situation.
The way the Warriors acquired him was as part of the Klay Thompson sign and trade. They created a trade exception. They had got a second round pick. What did Dallas send to Golden State?
I was just looking at that.
Well, whatever they sent, I will tell you that what Philly
Josh Green went to Charlotte.
Right.
Yeah, Josh Green went to Charlotte. A second round pick, I think went to Minnesota. But ultimately, it was Klay Thompson for Buddy Hield and Kyle Anderson.
Right, but the second round, Warriors sent a second round pick for Buddy Hield, and that second round pick was the second round pick they got from Dallas. So they maneuvered it. And here's something else: Klay Thompson was unhappy last year.
Yes,
he was unhappy. So they traded it, regardless if you want to get out of the money aspect of it, you want to get out of Moneyball, fine. Klay Thompson was frustrated. Buddy Hield is over the moon.
Yeah,
and it may not last. We're in November, but that's all a fact.
Mike Dunleavy turns Klay Thompson, who was a solid player, who last year was obviously making a lot of money because it was the end of a max deal. That's why I said this summer, turning him into Kyle Anderson, DeAnthony Melton, and Buddy Hield made Golden State better. It's not a knock on Klay Thompson. Doesn't mean he's not going to get a statue. Doesn't mean he's not a first ballot Hall of Famer. But they got 3 good NBA rotation players for one player who was not happy there. And now Klay is happy in Dallas. It's a good fit for him. And it's a great setup for the Warriors because, look, if Buddy Hield is playing like this, like MacMahon said, he's not going to shoot 50% on threes all year. There will become a stretch when Buddy starts shooting 25% for a couple weeks. And like at the end of the Houston game, he'll have a couple turnovers because he's not great handling the ball. And maybe he'll start playing 10 minutes a game for a while. And you know what? There won't be national discussion about him going to playing 12 minutes a game, or national discussion about him getting pulled out of the starting lineup or benched in a half or whatever, because he's not Klay Thompson. And that's fine. And Kyle Anderson last night hit 3 threes in the second quarter. He's a terrific ball handler, really good defender. Like, he fills in a lot of gaps. And DeAnthony Melton, if his back holds up, and he's now back on the shelf with back issues, so we'll see, is an excellent two-way player who's a 40% three-point shooter who can really get into people defensively. So, like, Mike Dunleavy has done a great job filling out this roster, giving Steve Kerr a lot of depth, even adding a guy like Lindy Waters from Oklahoma City, who's sort of a cast-off, forgotten dude. Another guy who can hit shots, can fill in gaps, can play a little bit. Like, they just have a deep, versatile roster that fits the way Steve Kerr and Steph Curry want to play, and they're having a ball playing this way. And even Steph last night, first thing he said was, somebody tried to say, hey, you said this team was going to be relevant, could be relevant back at media day. Like, did you see this coming? And the first thing he said was, we haven't done anything yet. Like, he's very quick to say but I just mean, like, they're not sitting here saying we're a title contender. They're very realistic about where they are, but the pieces fit really well. It all makes sense. And yes, not having the cloud of what's going to happen with Klay hanging over the team, I think has worked out great for Klay in Dallas. And I think it's worked out great for the Warriors too.
No question. Now, having said that, and we've sung Kumbaya, we need to talk about Kuminga, who all this happiness, is he happy playing sometimes 18 minutes, sometimes 28 minutes, whatever? Is he happy? Sometimes he starts, sometimes he comes off the bench, didn't get the extension in the final year of his rookie contract. Jonathan Kuminga is a wild card for a lot of different reasons, I think, with that Warriors team, in terms of potential transactional flexibility, in terms of upside, and just in terms of like the whole chemistry equation. I'm not sitting here saying anything negative about him, but look, we just had an agent on who talks about guys want playing time because they want to get paid. Jonathan Kuminga is in a position where he has the right to believe he is worth a whole bunch of money, and he's not getting the kind of minutes that would justify that kind of contract.
Nobody on the Warriors is averaging over 28 minutes. They got 13 guys are playing. I think 7 of them are averaging between 13 and 20 minutes. And the ironic thing is that Steve Kerr, because he was just in Boston getting booed for the Tatum stuff, Steve Kerr is playing this roster it's not the exact same, kind of like an Olympic team roster, because the Krzyzewski model, and I mean, Krzyzewski, was the one who did it for Team USA. I'm not like this is but unheard of in basketball, just to be clear. The Krzyzewski model with Team USA, put 5 guys out there, play absolutely intense, exhausting defense, so you're heaving and exhausted after 5 or 6 minutes, send 5 more all-stars in, do the same thing, and overwhelm the international game with athleticism, fast break basketball. Obviously, the Warriors aren't playing quite like that, but if you look at the activity that they have on the perimeter, he's basically asking his perimeter players to go in there and exhaust yourself in that 15 to 18 to 20 minutes so that I can just rotate you in and out. And in that game against Boston, they had 27 double teams. They trapped 27 times on their perimeter in that game. And you would think that double teaming against Boston would be a disaster because they have 5 guys who can shoot the 3. They can just pass their way through it and they're going to end up with an open 3. And yeah, no Jaylen Brown, no Porzingis. Not quite the same as when they would have them, but they were able to have a great defensive game for the most part because they have so many bodies. And so I don't know if it's sustainable, Bontemps, to keep playing 12 or 13 guys. I don't know if it's sustainable to play
it's not. I mean, even the Warriors would say it's not. Like you're not going to be able to do that in the playoffs. I mean, that was the first thing that Steph said after the game. Like last night was the first time they played 3 guys more than 30 minutes. Wiggins got over 30. Steph and Draymond were over 30. It's not going to work later on. But look, we're also talking about a team that 2 years ago ran out of gas by the end of the first round when they barely got by the Kings. Then the Lakers waxed them in the second round. And then last year got their doors blown off in the first playing game, right? This is not a team that we're talking about that's seen as a championship contending team. Like if they are back in the mix in the top 4 in the West and put themselves in a position where they do have some draft assets, they do have some young players. If a guy does come available, they could potentially go after somebody to strengthen their team. Maybe we are talking about them in a different light in a few months. But, to go back to Steph's quote from Media Day, said, I think this is a team that could be relevant early in the season, and we'll see what happens. We can assess where we're at from there. And 10% of the season down, they're tied for first in the West. They look very relevant. And they're playing a style that's going to win them games. Right. Well, they're playing a style that's going to win regular season games.
All right, let's talk about the game I was at on Wednesday night here in Los Angeles, out at the Intuit Dome. 76ers were in town to play the Clippers. This was seen as a Paul George return game, and that was, had its moments. The fans at the Wall all turned their back like it was,
all 7 of them.
North Carolina at Duke. It was not a full crowd. I'm not going to lie to you there. It was not a full crowd. It was not like
season ticket holders been sending me pictures from the crowd of every game going, a lot of people here at the Intuit Dome.
Yeah, well, I think PG kind of made that sort of reference when he was sort of clapping back. He was a little annoyed they were booing him.
I also thought that was silly from Paul. Like, come on. I mean, whatever. Fans boo. Look, you left the team as a free agent. Come on. What are we doing?
Well, he was saying left as a free agent. He didn't, ask to be traded. They offered him.
I understand, but again, what do we do?
Well,
you left the team.
Fans are booing because they're frustrated because they still owe Oklahoma City 73 picks. Just like, by the way, Philadelphia picked Oklahoma City as top 6 protected this year.
Yeah, I think some Clipper fans took offense to some of the stuff that Paul said on his podcast. I actually went back and listened to, and I didn't listen to every podcast, but I went back and listened to some of it to see what they were offended about. He basically just described the Clippers' offers.
They were offended that he left.
Yeah,
like, okay, that's fine.
Didn't he say something like feeling like it was a JV franchise in LA? Something, whatever.
Oh, that's right.
The point is, him getting mad about being booed.
Like, I'm sorry, the Lakers are a higher profile franchise.
Yeah. We've spent too much time talking about it.
So anyway, but this is really about the 76ers and their state. I mean, the Clippers are keeping their head above water. They're defending. Norm Powell is having a great start to the season.
Clippers are basically a slightly lesser version of the Warriors. Like, they're going to be a tough team to play every night. They play a bunch of guys. They play really hard. And if James Harden hits shots, they're going to be able to win some games.
And James Harden is not hitting that many shots, but he's doing a lot for them otherwise. Okay. Let me just say that my experience of going to Ty Lue's press conference before the game and then going to Nick Nurse's press conference, 2 guys who I've known for a long time, 2 guys who I've covered into to championships with other teams. it's like Ty Lue has handed off his burden to Nick Nurse.
Has he? Because I don't know. He's got his own burden still.
No, only because people assume Kawhi's not playing in forever.
That's
right.
True.
Well, nobody's asking about it
anymore.
No, nobody's asking anymore.
Because
so it's seriously. I was talking to an executive. I mentioned this in the story that the story that Bontemps and I have on every Friday, that published on Friday.
Oh, the Romo Witten notebook. Go on.
We don't have a name really for it.
That's what it's named, the Romo Witten notebook.
Who's Romo and who's Witten?
File.
Oh, yeah, you're Romo. I mean, Bontemps is just Bontemps has got a future in high school football coaching. Go
on. So it's like the 76ers have become the Clippers East. And not just because of Paul George, but like they've got two players that the head coach has got to spend like a percentage of his media talk every day detailing what's going on, what's their availability. You're saying 3?
Unfortunately, a third now with Tyrese Maxey.
Yeah, but Maxey has. I mean, Tyrese Maxey was leading the league in minutes played, and he hurt his hamstring. Boy, you could never have predicted.
Well, and again, directly, probably not directly related, but when he has to carry such a massive burden,
they have to play him that many minutes.
The other two guys who Paul George just got back, Embiid going to serve the suspension, and then to your point, once Embiid's back, is he playing tonight? Is he playing tonight? And Paul George, it was
Ty Lue didn't have to answer one syllable about player availability. He could only talk about what they were going to do for the game.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's the only thing I'm pushing back on is that they're still paying Kawhi Leonard, and he's just not.
I understand. I understand, but
it's just not a daily saga. It's not a good.
It was a daily saga for the Clippers for years.
Sure.
And the Clippers were basically in a position where try to get through the regular season with as limited damage as possible in the record.
Yeah.
So that when you got to the postseason, maybe you could hope against hope that the two guys would be healthy and you could make a run. And in fact, one thing Ty did say, he was kind of wistful about that run a couple of years ago, MacMahon, that you covered, where they beat the Mavericks and they beat the Jazz. And Ty was saying, I thought that was our team, because he was sort of reminiscing about Paul George. He's like, I thought that was the team was going to win it. I thought we were in a good place. I thought we defended. I thought we all knew our roles, and it just didn't happen. And so now you got Nick Nurse over there going, he actually said the positive thing about the suspension was that at least they knew when Joel would play, because they know Joel Embiid is going to play on Tuesday. And he wasn't taking a shot at Joel. He was just saying, it's nice to know when he's going to play.
I think they knew when he was going to play, which was on this road trip. And now
that's what he said publicly.
Well, I understand.
He's going to play.
I understand. And I'm saying that this has bumped it back by at least an extra game or two, which they can't necessarily afford because they're losing every game. And the game Monday night when they played in Phoenix and they had a big lead, and Kevin Durant, who's been unbelievable to start the year, has got a real argument to be MVP of the league, I think, through the first couple of weeks of the season, absolutely tore them apart down the stretch of that game, and they won. And then Tyrese Maxey hurts his hamstring the next game. He's going to be out at least a couple of weeks. We'll see how they do in this game against the Lakers, but we'll see if Anthony Davis is going to play. Anthony Davis now got his own injury issues, but when it rains, it pours, and it's pouring in Philly. And the thing they can point to, as I've said a few times, is at least the rest of the East is such an absolute mess.
That's true.
That they can get these guys back on the court and at least can point to, when we have these 3 guys available, if we ever do, we can like our chances about where we're at. And that's only because the Bucks are obviously in danger zone territory with the way they've started while healthy. And we'll see what happens in this game against Utah tonight. Orlando's without Paolo Banchero. Their offense is really going to struggle for a while.
Yeah, they're 0-4 since Paolo got hurt.
Yeah, he's out. The Heat have been, stumbling out of the gate. They haven't looked great. I mean, really,
Tyler Hero is off to a good start this season. A guy who's been maligned over the last couple of years and injured. Tyler Hero is playing well for the Heat.
He's playing well, and the Heat are not winning games. And the Cavs have looked great, and the Celtics have looked great, and everybody else is kind of blah or worse. So
yeah, I had a Western GM lament to me, and this is as of today's standings because there's games tonight. But he was like, if you're 500 in the East, you're in third. If you're 500 in the West, you're in 10th.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's crazy. I thought you were going to say at least the Sixers pick is top 6 protected. That's the pick they gave up to dump Al Horford's salary.
Oh, no.
Well, they got Danny Green in the trade, which was a good trade at the time. But yes, it's not
sure. Right.
But it could look rough this year, depending on how things go.
Yeah. I just think Philly at this point, they're in survival mode.
Yeah.
And now they lose Maxey and they get a Laker team that's lost 4 or 5, and JJ is challenging all player other than LeBron's. Yeah. AD didn't play on Wednesday, but he's like, other than LeBron, all of you were crap.
He's challenging everybody who's younger than him on that roster.
That's right. So that's who the 76ers get, is they get a pissed off Laker team finally home and no Maxey.
It just was taunted by John Morant during and after the game.
Oh my God. You know what was amazing about that? So, Ja, poking the bear, back to the poke the bear series. Mm-hmm. I loved this one moment in that game where LeBron, had the ball in the lane, and Ja just came up from behind him and just slammed him from behind. And LeBron turned around, was like, "What the hell?" And Ja was like, "Yeah, I did it. What do you want to say?"
Yeah, and that's one of those things that's probably not going to happen in the park. They're not in the same weight class, but Ja was making a statement. We ain't backing down from anybody. And hey, the Grizzlies took a year off. Their swagger is the same as it ever was, for better or worse. It's funny. I go back to the first day of camp. I was in Nashville with the Grizzlies, and Ja talked afterwards, and he said, we all feel like we ain't done yet. And the most important part of that sentence was yet. Right. The implication that they still are very, very confident that they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. And we'll see if they're right or not. But lack of belief will not be something that hurts the Grizzlies. That's for sure.
Here's the thing. The Sixers will not say this, especially because earlier this year they got fined $100,000 for being too honest. At this point, they're probably like, let's try to get in the top 6.
Listen, let me just show you some numbers. There's some numbers. While you're talking, I was pulling up our internal ESPN BPI numbers. You want to guess where the Sixers are projected to finish in the East?
12th.
3rd. You want to guess? You want to guess how many wins they're projected to have in the East?
Would it 43. Win the Spurs bet?
43. Right now, 43 is the number for the team, by the way, that is projected to finish 3rd. Yeah. The Celtics are projected to win 59.5. The Cavs are projected to win 58. Remember that, 59.5 and 58. The 3rd place team, the Sixers, are projected to win 43. Yeah. The 4th place team, the Heat, are projected to win 42. The 5th place team, the Knicks, are projected to win 40 games.
Where are the Bucks?
7th at 39. Behind the Pacers and just ahead of the Hawks.
Well,
BPI
is not a perfect machine.
No, but it's accounting for games missed and injuries and
I know. I'm sure Daryl Morey has his own projection system.
And by the way, if the Sixers win 50,
70 still.
If the Sixers win 43 games, that's like close to a 50-win pace from now. That's the thing. They're in a hole already.
Yeah, and
they're in a hole. Maxey's going to be out for hopefully not too long, but weeks. Yeah. And we'll see how often Embiid and the whole plan was for those guys not to play on a lot of nights anyways. We'll see how often they're on the floor.
Right. Well, that's the thing is they've got to – it's one thing you're like, okay, you're waiting for Paul George, you're waiting for Embiid, and okay. But now with the Embiid suspension, with, Embiid admitting that he's got an issue with that knee, that there's swelling in there. He's not just sort of shortening the season. He's got an issue. Mm-hmm. The Maxey injury and the way things are going, like you got to stop the bleeding. You can't. Okay, so they're 1-6 and they're on the West Coast. Okay, you can't let this go to 3-12.
No.
Good teams that make runs in the playoffs can lose 6 out of 7 games. That it might happen in January as opposed to the start of the season. It's not as, you don't always see it.
Right.
But they do have to put their foot in the ground here.
Well, now is where that game Monday was just a killer. Like, they're up late. They played really well. Gershon Yabusele came in off the bench, hit a bunch of shots. It looked like they were going to win.
Gershon Yabusele, who is playing almost more than Andre Drummond right now at center.
Yeah,
because Drummond is not filling in like they needed him to.
Yeah, I mean, look, that's the kind of game when you're in the stretch that you're in like this. If you're a team like Philly, you got to win that game, and they did. And but across the East, like the Knicks have been scuffling. They have an interesting game with Milwaukee. I'll be at the game on Friday. We'll see how they do. They just lost in Atlanta on Wednesday. Trae Young, in very MacMahon-like fashion, got on the mic after the game and said, "I hope all the Knicks fans have fun going home."
To his own arena.
Yeah,
he said it to his own arena.
Which is great, but it's going to be very interesting. By the way, since I have the numbers up, just in case, just so you guys have them, out west, want to guess what the current top 4 is projected to be?
Oh my God, it ain't 43 wins.
Top 4
numbers go down pretty fast. I just
Oklahoma City is obviously number 1.
Oklahoma City is number 1 at 56.
I'm going to guess Dallas or Minnesota.
Dallas is 3rd at 50. Minnesota is 6th at 46.
They have the Nuggets in there?
Nuggets are 5th at 47.
By the way, big win for the Nuggets and getting rid of the O in OKC. Now it's 1 KC.
Yes. So Phoenix, speaking, the Suns are 51.5.
See, this is where I think on the BPI. The Suns are doing great. They're 7-1. They have 6. They're 6-0 in clutch when the game's gone to clutch time. Some of that is variance. You're not going to win every close game.
Yeah. Who else?
The Warriors are 4th, 47, just ahead of our 49. Denver's at 5th. Minnesota 6th, and then phase 3 fully engaged.
Yeah, the Rockets.
7th with 44. The Kings, 8th, just under 44, but essentially 44. Memphis, 9th with 43.5, and the Lakers and JJ Redick, 10th.
McTen seed.
Hey, they're McTen seed in the standings right now. McTen seed and BPI, baby.
That's all is well when McTen seed.
All is well.
Mercifully, that road trip's over.
All right. Thank you to Mark Bartelstein for joining us on the Hoop Collective. Encourage all other agents to come on. Just reach out. We'll be glad to have you.
Let's do
it. Thank you to MacMahon. Thank you to Bontemps. Thank you to Taylor, who's pinch hitting for Jackson. I don't even know where Jackson went. He's flew off to
too
Kansas.
Big time. Can't be bothered.
He flew off to Kansas or something. I don't know where he went, but taking a little 4-day weekend. Thank you for watching, listening to Hoop Collective. We'll talk to you next week.
Adios, amigos.